Welcome to today's afternoon tea conversation. I'm Ingeborg and I'm the leader of Women in Global Health Norway. I want you to meet some of our members, especially those that have been appointed to the Women in Global Health Norway's Advisory Group. Today, I'm really looking forward to a chat with Bernadette Kumar, a medical doctor from India with a PhD and postdoctoral fellowship from the University of Oslo. Bernadette has a broad international experience from a vast number of organizations, and she's dedicated her life to the very important topic of migration and health. So now Bernadette is tuning in from her home base in Nepal. I am here in my attic, as I mentioned, with a cup of tea in Oslo. So Bernadette, it's really wonderful to see you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ingeborg, and hello to everybody from Kathmandu in Nepal. It's a wonderful sunny day here, and I'm so glad to be able to have this opportunity to have this afternoon tea with you, Ingeborg.
Yes. Your life seems to have been very much defined by your passion for migration and health, as I mentioned, Bernadette. I would be really curious to hear a little bit more about the roads you've traveled. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. And I have to say that this was not my plan. It was definitely not what I have thought I would do. During my childhood days growing up in India, in New Delhi, one of the capital of India and one of the largest densely populated cities in the world. And I think it's because I became a migrant myself that migration health also became a passion. So it's about, as Gandhi said, you have to be the change that you want to see in your life. And I think that both my life defined by my moving both within India and outside of India, also defines my passion for the work in migration and health. And it was not a path that was, charted out when I graduated as a medical doctor, because of course the path that is, charted out when you graduate as a medical doctor is that you do your degree, you do your specialization, and then you work in one of those specialities. And I was actually doing all of that when by, I would say, circumstances, or whether it was the forces of the universe, whatever you might call it, I ended up working with the war wounded in southern Sudan, and there was a civil war going on. And that's how my life in global health and my migration process continued. So I would say that it was not the plan that I had.
Oh, yeah. So that was kind of your defining moment, so to speak. And actually, mind you, I did read once this book, Emma's War, and you're indeed mentioned there. I was, yes.
Yeah, it was. And actually, when I was in South Sudan, neither my parents nor my head of department in surgery in India knew that I was in Southern Sudan, because I was actually taking a break in France with my aunt, and there was an NGO that needed somebody, a surgeon, a trauma surgeon, to volunteer for 6 months, 6 weeks, sorry, in Southern Sudan. And of course, at that time, it was before mobiles and WhatsApp and all this kind of information that you have, where you know constantly every second where people are. I mean, one wrote a letter or one called in a couple of weeks, and so off I went to Southern Sudan for 6 weeks, and I stayed there. Feels like a lifetime, but the defining moment was also for me when I was taken hostage by the SPLA guerrillas. That is part of what happened in the Sudan, and then the UN asked me to work for them after that. So when people often say, "Why did you join the UN?" I said, I didn't have a classical pathway of applying for a job. I got taken hostage by the guerrillas, so I wouldn't recommend it very much. But um, I don't ever regret, that sort of turn of events where I went from, I would say, a very sort of safe planned career in clinical medicine in India to global health and to working in public health and to work in, I would say, both war zones and very challenging situations.
So is there any defining moment in your life that shaped you as a leader? That you would like to share with us?
I think that I would say that there's not one moment as such, but there are many instances that point you towards the direction of leadership. And you could either embrace those moments and those instances, or one could say, this is not something that is for me. So the first instance that I remember and recall very closely is from school and high school. And in India, the girls in the high school, I went to an all-girls school, elect their student representatives. And while I've always been very active, I did not expect to be elected as vice head girl of the school. And when the girls placed this confidence in me, it was both thrilling, but at the same time, you carry a responsibility of representing others and also being there for them. And from that particular moment, from my university education, and then in surgery, you also, as a surgeon, you do have to take the leadership because you have a patient who's, under anesthesia, and you're responsible in a way for that particular patient. And the rest of the team has to work together with you. And one instance I do remember is when the senior surgeon, and I was only a lowly resident, and we were operating, and he looked at me and said, and now you finish up. And I was flabbergasted. I just stood there frozen and thinking, oh my God. And I think that was awesome. I just, took a deep breath and said, and the head nurse who was there, she said to me, you can do this. And I thought, yes, I can do this. But it's also about, you have a whole team there and you have to lead them. And, you can't be the one who suddenly falls apart. So I think that's, again, always been my relationship in terms of, slowly the instances, actually each event, each instance, each moment has taught me a particular value of leadership. And I think the final thing that really sort of, for me, was an indication that this is something that both is meant for me, but also that I, in particular, like and are suitable in terms of my competencies, was when I was in Southern Sudan, as I mentioned earlier, and we had a situation where 100,000 refugees or returnees, because they were Sudanese who had gone to Ethiopia, and in 1992 the Mengistu government fell. And when the Mengistu government fell, all these people came back to South Sudan. And we were a team of 45 people working for this particular emergency situation. And the team leader, he was a very senior colleague in the UN. And then, due to some circumstances, he had to leave. And then our representative called me and said, you take over. I was, I think, one of the youngest people there. And I thought, this is very strange. We have an emergency situation. I have 45 people, I have 100,000 people that we have to take care of their food, medicine, etc., etc. And I said to him, no, I can't. And he said, no, you can, and you will, just get on with it. And I think he placed his confidence in me, which was where I just had to get on with it. And that's why sometimes, when I look back, I think it's the moment of where both people have that confidence in you, they trust you. And when they do that, then you have the confidence also that you have to live up to that, but that you can do it. So I think these are, just examples of instances, moments. But I think from that particular moment of leading this team of UN workers and NGOs in Southern Sudan at this emergency response, there was no turning back. And I was very young. I was probably one of the youngest people. I hadn't even, I was not even 30. So this was very, very early on in my career.
Wow, fascinating. Maybe you have any advice or words of wisdom for young women on the skills of necessity or necessities of becoming a successful leader, Bernadette? Maybe something you wish you were told when first entering your professional life.
I think very often, I will go back to a very personal story in my life. And when I was 4 or 5 years old, I was very fascinated with aircrafts, and I said to my father, I think I'm going to become a pilot. And he said to me, girls don't usually become a pilot, don't become pilots, And my mother said, well, that's not really true. And there was a discussion, but then there was this whole thing about gender, which comes up very early. And without consciously and unconsciously, what girls are supposed to do and what girls are not supposed to do. Very often this conversation doesn't happen with boys, but it happens very often with girls. And so the next time I said I wanted to become a doctor, my father said, well, that is also a man dominated field, but if that is what you really want to do, go for it. So I think very often I would say to young women that there is a chorus around that is trying to tell you this is what girls do and this is what girls don't do. And it's not that you can completely block it out because there are cultural issues related. And maybe in a country like Norway, in Scandinavia, and Europe, it might be easier. But in a lot of low and middle income countries and lots of traditional societies, it's not that easy to break out and do something that you're not supposed to do. The first thing is that when that happens, you have to be able to listen to your inner voice, not just to the babble around you that says, do this, don't do that. The second thing is when somebody places their trust in you and says, you can do it, don't lose that confidence because very often people will tell you and you feel, no, I can't. So there is this sort of inner confidence that you have to not only trust yourself, but you also have to trust other people. And very often, when young women and young girls are asked to take up something, the immediate response is, no, I can't do it. I'm not good enough to do it. Or, maybe I will fail if I do it. And I think these things are real obstacles that stop you. I'm not saying that we should all start bungee jumping or, take all the risks in life, but sometimes you have to be, you know, be when that opportunity comes and knocks on the door, don't shut it down immediately. Give it thought. I mean, you don't have to jump into it anyway, but let's not go with the sort of reflex action that no, I can't do it. No, I won't be good enough to do it. And I think this other thing that comes on very early on in life, and for a lot of leaders, that's also a very big challenge, and that's the striving towards perfection. I think striving towards excellence is fantastic, and we must all strive towards excellence. But striving towards perfection becomes, in a way, an enemy because we're not perfect. We can never be perfect. And then we think that because we're not perfect, we can't do it. And that in itself becomes a very big obstacle to saying yes. So I would say earlier on in your life, say yes. Say yes to things. And, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. The second thing I would say is really one of the things we should never worry about is making mistakes. We'll all make mistakes. And I have to say that sometimes we're also very scared to take up things, to say yes, because we're afraid of failing. We're afraid of the mistakes. And I have to say, you learn as much, if not more, from the mistakes you made, as your successes. So that's what I would also say, that earlier on in your life, it's very important in the early stages that one really is not afraid to make those mistakes. And in order, to not to be afraid, what one really needs is good mentors. One needs the support where you feel safe so that you are in an environment where you feel, okay, even if I make a mistake, it's not a problem. It's not the, school teacher yelling at you or, you're getting into trouble because you've done something wrong. I think those are things that I would say that you need to have mentoring. And we often also think that mentors are people who are old and wise, and that's important. I've had people who are old and wise, but I've also had my peer group who are very good mentors, because your peer group will be able to give you feedback and give you the support that you need, and sometimes the courage, because it's not always easy to take up things when, particularly when there's a lot of resistance or where there are lots of obstacles. And I see that the area that I work with, migration and health, it's not the easiest area. It's an area that is very challenging, but also it's politically very debated. It's not so easy to get funding. It's not easy to implement. But that's what I think makes it also very, very, very rewarding when we actually manage to get some things done.
It brings me to my actually, unfortunately, last question, and that is on networks like our network, Women in Global Health Norway. How come you think there is a need for such a network in a society that regards itself as fully equal, like ours in Norway?
I think because, first of all, my belief that no woman is an island. So we all need to connect, and we all need to connect in different spheres of life and at different stages of life. I think all of us will need that connect and that link to others. And for women leaders, I think it's very hard because there are some role models, and I think in Norway as well. But those role models, it's not as if it's exhaustive. So you will always need role models in different stages, and the role model you had in school may not be the role model you have in college, may not be the role model you have at work. So you will need to have women who are role models, who are mentors, but I think just women that you have a safe space to discuss. And there can never be enough safe spaces. And by what I mean by safe spaces is sometimes it's not always easy to discuss things at a workplace because it may not be the right thing to do to discuss at a workplace. Sometimes it's not easy to discuss in public because, as we know now, with social media and with it being so active, you might be in the middle of something that you don't want to be. So therefore you will always need to have a group like Women in Global Health, where it can be a very safe platform to discuss issues that you may not want to discuss elsewhere. That's one thing. The other thing is that it's, as it suggests, a network. And networking is also so important because not all of us know everybody and everything. And that's where one can reach out and, as discussed earlier, ask for help. And sometimes we might feel hesitant or we might feel embarrassed to ask for help in different settings, whether it's a work setting or a home setting, or simply because we don't know people we can ask for help. And the Women in Global Health is an excellent arena, again, to ask for help. And it's very natural to ask for help in a Women in Global Health arena. And the third thing I think, which should not be undermined, is because it's always very nice. And it's something where we can actually all grow together. So there's a growth perspective in networks because you can have your own individual growth without other people. But when you are with a like minded group where there are values, where there are issues that give you, in a way, a nourishment, your growth will be very different. So you also have an individual growth, both with what you contribute to the network, but also what the network gives you. So I think there will always be a need for that kind of network in Norway, regardless of all the other circumstances in terms of equity and in terms of legislation and in terms of opportunity and in terms of, I would say, the economical situation as well in Norway.
Thank you, Bernadette. And we're looking forward to having you home in Oslo, in Norway as well. And thanks to all our listeners for taking time to listen in and supporting Women in Global Health Norway. Goodbye.